Quilt Monkey is brought to you by Aurifil Italian thread, perfectly suited for all your quilting projects.
Hi and welcome to Quilt Monkey. Back on our very first show in season 1, we looked at English paper piecing and piecing hexagons. As this is our very first show for season 4, we thought that we would go back and revisit English paper piecing because it is one of my most favourite things to do, and have a look at alternative ways of using hexagons and also their little baby sister, the half hexagon. So we're going to talk a little bit about the quilt that's behind me and how much I love that, and I'm going to show you some fun new blocks using a slightly different shape. So I'm going to gather up all my stuff and show you what we're going to be doing today. So the quilt behind me I made back in 2011. I know that because I labelled it and I added a date, which I tend to forget to do. And it's probably my most favourite ever quilt. It took me a few months, it didn't take me that long, but then back in 2011 I didn't work. My kids were much smaller and I took my English paper piecing everywhere I went. So I'd take it in the car when I was waiting for the kids to do stuff, I'd take it on the train, I'd take it on holiday. Wherever I was, you could guarantee that I had a bag full of hexagons. So it didn't take me that long to do it. And also, when you look a little bit closer, you can see that the pieced area isn't actually that big. And then I've appliqued it onto a background fabric. So it's kind of a cheat, and I got a much bigger quilt without doing quite as much piecing. And I like the effect because you've got that little border around it with the appliqued flowers. So you could do a similar thing with these blocks. And they're just a half hexagon, which I bought really cheaply off of the internet. They are a slightly heavier weight paper than a normal copier paper, and this size is 1.5 inches, but you can get loads of different sizes from as tiny to kind of pretty big. This size, you end up with quite a nice sized block that is sort of perfect for a mug or a cup. It's a nice coaster mug rug type of size. And it's easy. It's big enough to come together quite quickly when you make multiples of them, but small enough to look like there's a whole ton of work involved, which really, if you're going to hand piece something, you want it to look like you've worked hard, even if you haven't particularly. So I bought these off the internet. They were just a couple of pounds for a set of 50. So a couple of dollars, a couple of pounds, and you'll get quite a decent selection. You don't want too many to start off with, because if you buy hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, it's quite a big financial investment and you might hate piecing them. Even if you like English paper piecing, there's no guarantee that you're going to like every single shape. There are some shapes that I just don't like piecing. I don't particularly like piecing diamonds, but I like triangles. I just don't like the diamonds so much. I don't know why, I just don't. But my favourite is probably a hexagon. So because you've got half hexagons, and we need, for these two blocks, we need a whole hexagon in the centre. Rather than buying a pack of large hexagons as well, it's a half hexagon. Two together obviously makes a whole. So I've just stuck a little bit of tape on the back there of two of them that I've just laid together, and I've got my whole hexagon. Magic. When you cut out your fabrics, you want to make sure that you've got just a touch more than 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. So you've got a little bit more to play with, a little bit more wiggle room, because it's going to get more manipulation. You're going to be carrying these around, they're going to be in your bag, they're going to be, the papers are going to be removed. You're going to do more with it. So the fabric is going to fray a little bit and you don't want to lose too much fabric and then your hand-pieced masterpiece to start falling to pieces. And rather than thread basting, I'm using a glue pen. You can pick these up in most sewing stores now. You can get different brands of them and they pretty much all come with a coloured glue. You pop it on and then the glue dries and it dries clear. These are fantastic. They really are lovely, but they are also quite expensive. So if you're going to make a whole quilt, then the cheaper alternative obviously is to thread based. But another alternative that you might have not considered is that these are basically a glue stick. And a glue stick is a glue stick is a glue stick. So a water-soluble glue stick that you can buy from any office supply store in packs of 10 or 20 is going to be much more economical and cheaper in the long run than buying these fancy, specially for sewing glue sticks. If you're doing tiny, tiny pieces, because obviously a regular glue stick is a bit bigger, then I would recommend you keep one of these. So you've got one of these handy for really tiny pieces. But if you're doing pieces like this, then a normal glue stick, particularly the cheaper end, so not like a fancy branded one, but the cheap packs of 10, those ones are the ones that you want because the glue doesn't stick particularly well. And when the glue doesn't stick particularly well, then your papers are going to come out easier at the end of it. So that's my handy tip of the day. So with basting, with the glue, I swipe the paper first and just pop it in the middle. And then that holds it in place and it works like a pin. And then a little bit of glue at the top, fold your first edge down. You want to just fold it down, don't pull and fold, because if you pull and fold, that fold is going to be way too tight. And when you're sewing your pieces together, you're really going to struggle with kind of getting your needle in and putting too much pressure on your hand. So you want to just swipe and then fold. So you have got a little bit of movement on these edges. Not a lot so it's loose, but just enough to give your needle some space, because believe me, the first time I used these glue pens, I did pull my fabrics way, way too tight around my papers and it almost killed my wrist. No, I do have old lady wrists, admittedly, and they can hurt a bit, but it wasn't fun. So once you've gone all the way round, your fabric is nice and secure in your hexagon there, and you can start on your half hexagons. So you want 6 half hexagons for each of these blocks. They both work in the same way, 1 full hexagon in the middle and then 6 around the outside. I'm using this collection called Playground by Amy Sinibaldi for Art Gallery Fabrics. It's got some really nice little fussy cutting details. So a lot of the prints are quite small scale, so they work really well with things like this, and also they've got some nice fun fussy cutting details. So we've got our full hexagon, we've got our 6 half hexagons, and to make this block it's really quite simple. We start with placing a hexagon with 2 half hexagons at the outside, and you want to sew this edge first. So start at the top here, go down and then sew the bottom of this hexagon to the edge here, and just continue around in the same way. Start here, down and across. Make sure you secure your stitches with a knot at the end of each row, all the way around until you get back to where you started. And that one is like that. Now you will have all these little dog ear type things. You want those. Don't even think about trimming those off. If you trim those off, you're going to get your papers come through, your fabric's going to fray. These are part of your seam. Don't touch them. I know they look kind of annoying, but they're good. So this second one is slightly more complicated. I'm going to take my thread and show you how to sew this. So I'm using Aurifil 80 weight, which is a new thread and has been specifically designed to be a much finer thread. It's on these little wooden spools, so it looks really cute. It's a very delicate thread, perfect for English paper piecing and also hand applique. So if you're doing a lot of needle turn applique, this is a really nice thread for that. It takes a little bit of getting used to, in that if you're anything like me, you can be a little bit heavy-handed, and there are times when I'm not thinking and I'll pull way too heavily and the thread will snap. But once you've got into a rhythm, once you've got used to the tension that you can apply to it, then it is a really, really lovely thread, and it disappears. It's like completely invisible. Of course, you can stick to your trusty 50 weight thread, and again, that's the perfect thread for English paper piecing. It's my go-to thread for everything. I mean, you can see I am running low on this particular spool, but this colour 2600 and 2615, which are both the very pale greys, I use for pretty much everything, for piecing, for quilting, for sewing my binding on, for anything. These are my absolute go-to. So we're going to take your centre hexagon and 1/2 hexagon and match up. So we've got a 1/2 hexagon here. Hold that little dog ear out of the way and start in the corner. Secure it with either a knot or by over stitching a few times. I like to poke my needle through, wrap my thread around and do a little knot that way. So it's a bit like a French knot. And then take your needle through all the way to the edge of the hexagon, not the edge of the 1/2 hexagon, because you'll be sewing thin air. Go to the edge. I'm going to work on about 10 to 12 stitches per inch. It's kind of the optimum. You don't want too many, because if you do too many, then you get like a satin stitch effect. And if you do too few, then your seam will be really, really weak. So there we go, to the end here. And once you get to this end, knot again to keep it secure. Open that out. Take your next 1/2 hexagon and then do the same again. So you're going to sew all the way round, just joining these edges first. And once you've joined all of those edges, then you can go back and sew these two together here. And once you've sewn all of these, the hexagon is lovely and secure, and you've got a nice little hex block. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a really nice size for a mug rug or a coaster. You can get 2 of them, place them together, and cut a piece of wadding that's just ever so slightly smaller all the way around, literally just 1/8 of an inch or so smaller. Take all your papers out really, really carefully, and then just whip stitch all the way around. Leave a little gap to squish your wadding in, flatten it out, and you've got yourself a nice, simple coaster or mug rug. You can also do another fun block using the 1/2 hexagon, and that's this little pinwheel block. So you can see it comes in 2 halves, again 6 1/2 hexagons, and you just arrange them like so, and sew them together. And once you've got the two halves, then you can join the two halves together, and that way, rather than sewing in the round, which would be easier, when you sew in two halves, you can make sure that you avoid getting that little tiny hole in the centre, which you would get if you were going round in a circle. These tessellate together really nicely. So it's a little bit more confusing to fit them all together, but they tessellate really nicely, and you can build up your design that way. And they do look pretty clever. And obviously completely different, but using exactly the same shape. So that is my introduction to the half hexagon, which is a little bit different. It's nice and easy. It's a perfect way for you to try something new with English paper piecing, especially whilst it's winter and it's a little bit cold and you can sit in front of a roaring fire doing a little bit of hand sewing. I'll see you next time on Quilt Monkey.